Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What the Haze. I'm your host, Hayes Wolfenden. Okay. Welcome, Curtis. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself first, please?
Hey, Hayes, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. I'm really excited to be here. A little bit about myself. My day job is I write TV and film, but for this particular podcast, because it's about writing, I actually would love to talk about my memoir that I wrote during COVID, and which I was lucky enough to sell to one of the big five publishers. And it's a book called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. And to support the book, I've actually given over 330 book talks in 9 countries. And so it's just been a really exciting adventure.
Yeah, it sounds it. Yeah, those book talks. Are there any book talks that has like stood out for you in the main? Like anything that's like been maybe well received, or you found it very interesting, or the audience stood out for you anyway?
Well, so those 330 that I've done is spread over like 2 years. So I literally was doing an event every night. And inevitably, you're going to get a lot of the same questions, you know. But I will have to say that there's a whole bunch of different ones for different reasons. Like, for instance, I did about 30 book talks actually in Chinese restaurants, right? Because the name of the book is Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. I just thought it'd be fun to sort of do a reading in a book in a Chinese restaurant where instead of me actually talking about my book, I actually just interviewed the owners and I talked to them about their journey. And it was just a really nice repartee between these people. And it was a chance for them to tell their stories. And we sold books, and actually, we sold just as many books when I did those events as when I went to a bookstore. Um, I also did a bunch of things internationally, which was fun. I did Oxford University in the UK, the British Library. I did this conference in France, in Saint Etienne. They were doing a whole conference on the city of Detroit, which is where my book is set. So it's just been really, really fun. I do have to say, though, that the type of person that's been great has been seeing a lot of our former customers from our family's restaurant who've come in, but also young kids who's currently working in their family's restaurant or small business and sharing their stories with me too. So it's just been really an incredible journey.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I started reading your book about a couple of days ago, and still pretty early days, like 20 or 30 pages in. But already I'm engrossed. I find actually the language as well. It's very smooth. It tends to flow really well, and like as they say, a classic page turner. Or I'm reading mine on a Kindle, so it kind of flows, and you go flow into the next page. I mean, I'll be honest. One of the things I learned. I mean, like obviously you grew up in Detroit. I had no idea that there was like a substantial Chinese minority in Detroit. Obviously I'm from the UK. I'm living in China. I wouldn't know that, and even just that alone, I thought was
well,
really valuable.
I wouldn't say that it was substantial. It was actually a very small community, but it's a long term community. I mean, my family arrived there in the late 1800s. And part of that was because when the Chinese first arrived in America, there was a lot of anti Chinese sentiment. And for those early immigrants, one of the strategies that they thought was to spread out, right? Like not to congregate in large communities. And because of that, you had people scattering to places in Colorado, Missouri, Michigan, very, very early on. Because you're not seen as a threat when there's just a small handful, then people aren't threatened. It's once you start having large numbers that people start to, this backlash starts to happen, I think. But to your
Yeah,
point about the writing, I actually have a poetry writing degree, and I feel like I wrote the book as a poet, meaning I paid attention to every single word and line and sound. And one of the things I love sharing is the story about when after we sold the book and we had to go through the editing process, the copy editor for my book. And copy editors have this reputation, right, as being the crankiest, meanest people in publishing, just because all they do is proofread. My copy editor actually wrote back and said, Please tell Mr. Chin this was a well written, eye opening, fascinating memoir. I really enjoyed reading it. And I told all my fellow writers this, right? And they all were saying things like, what? My copy editor didn't say bullshit about my book. So it's like, okay, I feel like I did a good job, writing a clean book, which is nice and important to me, because you do want that flow. You want things to just be effortless.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And again, when I'm reading it, I find that like I have that there's that almost like a perfect sense of place. And again, it obviously helps. It's a memoir. You remember, you recall, the environment you grew up in. But especially the restaurants, I find myself when you're talking about like different customers, like different ethnicities, I find myself imagining and placing myself there more as an observer than as a guest, and just kind of looking at the different people and thinking, yeah, what would white people at the time, how exotic would it have, this the Chinese food, how would it have appealed to them, and especially when that's a positive experience. I was, I was quite enthralled. I'm really looking forward to reading more of it. It's actually given me an idea as well. Like with these podcasts, I get writing guests on every week. And one of the things I think I might do and start doing, especially when I've got like, birthdays and Christmas and stuff, I might start, gifting, buying books and stuff and giving it to other people for presents. And this is one like that's on my radar because like my mom and dad, they visited China a few times to visit me. But my mom, all she reads these days is Second World War books. Okay. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's, and I've tried to. You should read novels. You should read something a bit different because just
Hmm.
reading about German tank commanders over and over again, I don't know. It doesn't. I can do it a little
Maybe it's
bit,
some
but not
sort
all
of
the time.
trauma that she's
So
trying to get over. Some family
no, I
trauma
think it's
she's trying to get
nostalgia.
over. Oh,
Nostalgia.
nostalgia.
A lot of British people get it when they
Mm.
get beyond a certain age, maybe over 70, over 65,
Mm.
and especially white people, especially. Um, my grandma had it as well, probably about the
Mm.
same age, started kicking in. Whereas it's not a universal thing. My dad's like, he just wants to read about nature and stuff, so he doesn't care. But it's just the kind of book I think if I got from my mum, I think it would be actually very good. So I've definitely
Oh,
got
that's
that in
very
mind.
sweet
So
of
it's
you.
given me a great idea.
Where in the UK are you
Yeah,
from?
you mentioned doing the talking. Oh, I'm
Oh.
from near Manchester. It's a small town called Burnley. Um, So yeah, and it makes me think about you mentioned Chinese restaurants and in America and dispersing, and it made me think when you said that of like yeah, in the UK maybe that was the same. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the people came. I'd have to think about the decades, when sixties, seventies, but a lot of them can be coming earlier. But like in every like town in the UK, even small town, very small towns, you'll have like a Chinese. We see like a Chinese chip shop or Chinese like takeaway takeout. Um, and it's so interesting. There's one near where I live in the UK in a very very small town. Always busy,
They're pretty
always
universal.
doing well.
So, because of this book, and this is something that may be useful to your nonfiction listeners, is that at the end of the day, you have to present yourself as an expert on a certain topic, right? And because I've written this book
Yeah,
about growing up in a Chinese restaurant, I have suddenly become this expert in Chinese food. And I get so many requests to produce podcasts or write articles about, the Chinese restaurant experience, or I get interviewed for it. And so one of the things that I'm working on now is I'm working on a documentary on Chinese restaurants around the world because you're right. Whether you go to the UK or the US or Canada or Thailand or the Philippines or even Africa, I mean, Chinese restaurants are everywhere, right? And that immigrant experience is very, very similar. Um, I know with the UK, I believe the first Chinatown was in Liverpool because it was more of a port town, and then slowly spread. And you guys have up where you're from, the Manchester area, you guys have the curry chips, So I'm learning all this stuff about regionalism amongst Chinese food too, which is really fun.
Yeah, typically the British Chinese food, because it is British Chinese, it tends to be more like Hong Kong. I think it's like Hong Kong style. Just like when like in where I live in Chengdu, there are a few Hong Kong restaurants. And yeah, it kind of tastes like that, kind of. But then
Well,
you've got like,
this is what someone said to me was that a lot of the Chinese restaurants in the UK took over old fish and chip shops, right? Chippy shops, or chippies, what you call them. And because the customers were already expecting to buy their chips from that place, and because the equipment was already there, that's why a lot of these Chinese restaurants just added that to the menu. I don't know. Can you confirm that or not?
sounds reasonable to me. When I was growing up, I mean, so I'm how old am I? I'm 48. I gotta check. I'm 48. When I was like what 10, 11 years old, that even then like Chinese takeaways were well established. So this would be like the 80s, already well established. I can believe. I think they either took over existing ones, or if existing ones closed down, they moved into that niche. They do. They're very, they've got a very good way of making sure that they can satisfy a large amount of people. So typically they'll do what you consider typical British food, fish and chips. They'll do fish and chips. They'll do pies, peas. They cover all that, and then of course they've got more kind of established Chinese fare, you know fried rice, that all that stuff, and it's kind of like it's almost a bit of a joke in a good way though. Like you go into a Chinese chip shop and you look up on the wall, and it's the numbers. I don't know if you have the same in America, and so you don't order the dish per se. You say the R54. And one of the things that amazes me is I went into my local Chinese chippy last summer, and we ordered our food, and we're not being very expansive. I think I ordered like Chinese curry, and that's another thing. The Chinese curry thing, I believe, I don't definitively know this, is like because we have a lot of substantial Indian or like Indian subcontinent population in the UK, and so I think that's where the curry comes from. I could be wrong. At least that's what I think. And so they've adapted that as well. And I love Chinese curry. It's so good on chips.
Yeah, it's
Really
interesting
good.
because I grew up with Chinese curry, but I have to admit, when I got older, I much prefer the Indian, Japanese, Thai curries, all a little bit
Oh
better
yeah,
than the
it,
Chinese
oh,
curry.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
yeah, just the curry alone, is it like the Asian curries, like how like I mean, people in Britain aren't that aware. They know of Indian curry, they'll know of Chinese curry from the chip shop. They've no idea about Japanese curry, no idea. And then you get things like Malaysian curry,
hmm,
Indonesian curry, and like
yeah,
maybe some people are aware of Malaysian curry, just a few. Indonesian curry, no, no, probably no one's aware there's a substantial Indian population, say in Singapore,
yeah,
for example, either. But I think with globalization, these little hidden secrets do become less. I think. Yeah, and I was going to say again when I was waiting in this chip shop, and I forgot what we ordered now. It was nothing really amazing, but there's a woman in front of me, white British, should be in her 40s or 50s, and she comes in, she orders one of the numbers, but it's a really like random like speciality. It's not like fried rice or anything. It's like something like egg foo young or something. And I find myself thinking, how did you decide that you liked that? I mean, so maybe someone bought it for her. I don't know, or maybe they go in one day and go, you know what? It's Saturday night. I'm watching a movie. I'll just try some stuff. I find that very interesting. How people find these little niches.
yeah,
To be honest, yeah. And you mentioned doing a documentary on Chinese restaurants. I can only imagine that would be enthralling. To be
yeah.
honest, are you going to stay in America to do that, or are you going to travel?
Well, I mean, it will be funding, but we are currently approaching funders in the UK, France, Germany, a few different countries. So I travel around for it. But in terms of my relationship to the UK. I love London. I've been going there for a month or two every year for about a decade, over a decade. I just find it a really creative city. I get a lot of work done there. I have a lot of friends. It's just got this really good vibe that's for me. So actually, with this book, I wrote a lot of it in the British Library. I would just
Okay,
go find a nice little. You have to fight for a table over there, but a
sure.
seat. But yeah, I just find it a really great place to write.
Yeah, just out of interest, when you're writing, do you write like in a notebook or which is like more like old school, or do you write on computers? Do you write on phones, iPads?
So when I first started writing, I'm in my 50s. So when I first started writing poetry, definitely was notebooks. I would just carry them around with me everywhere, and I just jot them down. When I switched over to longer format things, I first made the transition to playwriting and screenwriting. And with that, it's a little bit harder to just have a notebook, and it just seemed easier to just do it on a laptop. And then, the next form I did was, memoir writing. And with memoir writing, again, I do things mostly on the laptop, but where I am a little bit more portable is I have my phone, and on my phone they have notes programs, and so I will do that. I will also use Google Docs. So I upload my drafts onto Google Docs. So this way, if I'm just running around, if I'm on a bus, or if I'm waiting for a movie to start, I can easily just pull it out and make edits there onto the documents. So I find that it's very productive because I'm always thinking, right? Like, you could just be walking, you'll be having a conversation with somebody, and it'll be like, wow, that's the perfect line, right? Or that's something I was thinking of. And so I do have to have that access to that portability and access to my writing at any time.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar. For notebooks, I tend to write poetry in notebooks and
Hmm.
just it's scribble. It's scrawl. Someone could steal it and they wouldn't be able to read it. So it is. But
Well,
yeah,
there is
with
something about,
novels,
do you do handwritten novels? I mean, I think that
no.
would be pretty impressive. But there is something about the tactile nature of writing, the physical act, and how that connects you with it. But I just think it's, for me, it's too hard, like with the memoirs, um, to be able to do that. So yeah, I like using the phone, and I like being able to just take notes on it.
I think it's very, the writing style is very personal. So it's like for me, if I'm writing a novel, it's very much like, like speed of consciousness. I'm in the zone and I'm just trying to get it down as quick as I can. If I was writing in a notebook, I wouldn't be able to write quickly enough, and I think I'd take too much care, if that makes sense. My first draft, I'm just trying to get it down. Editing, I really slow down and look at it. That's what I
Because you
would
type
say.
faster. Because you type much faster than you can handwrite.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, I
It's
think as well for me, I think that I like to see when I'm typing on obviously a screen. I feel like I'm seeing it as it goes onto a book, like as I would read it in a book. And I do a lot of reading as well. So it's kind of I feel like they're both those like pastimes, both those skills are kind of reinforcing each other there. To be honest.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's brain is wired differently. One of the things that I say is that I grew up in a Chinese restaurant. As a little kid, I used to do my homework at the back of the restaurant, and I never knew when a customer would come in or the phone would ring, and I'd have to stop. So I trained myself at a very, very young age to be able to pick up work at a moment's notice. So I can actually write anywhere. I don't need to have a secluded 1 hour time where there's no noise out in a cabin or anything like that. Like I can write anywhere and I can pick up anywhere. If you just stop me and drop me somewhere and said, start writing now, I can write. And I think I mean, hopefully it's good writing, but I can do that because again, that's how I learned to write, think, process, create. And so everybody's a little bit different, right? I don't know what your childhood was like, if you had to work or if you studied all the time. Did you have a tutor? Were you a quiet kid that read by yourself a lot? I mean, I think that when you look back on your own childhood, I think you get a sense of, what's the best setting for you to be creative, I think.
Yeah, it's a good point. That I can't. I'm trying to think as you talk about my childhood
Hmm.
and what it was like. I think I mostly when I was a kid, I did my homework when I had homework over a set time, and then I went to watch cartoons. But I'm very much like yourself now. I tend to write. I tend to listen. I do prefer certain times of the day to write and have that kind of routine. But I write in different ways. Like I'm always trying to change it up. I have to change it to suit my lifestyle. So like I've got a very young family,
Mm.
and my kid is really young, and so because of that, I've not been able to write at home, and I've been getting the bus to and from school, and I've been riding on the bus, which is about an hour a day. That's coming to that's tough. It's tough. I'll tell you now. I get car sick.
Wow. Is that moving traffic or slow traffic for an hour? Is the bus moving?
Bit of both. Bit of both.
Oh, is it a
Yeah.
long distance
And
from you, your work, or can you walk?
it's like no, it's too far. It's like
It's too far.
25, 30 minutes by car, by bus.
Mm, okay. Yeah, yeah. But it's maybe because you are an educator, you're a teacher, you're more used to having a, a regimented schedule, right?
Yeah, I mean it's but then like the other day I went walking, went around this lake. It was great, loved it, powerful, love nature. Got an idea coming. I'll write it down. I'll do it later.
Mm.
I was like, no. I want to try and write it on my phone on the metro. Did it, knocked it out. I typed it up yesterday. It's actually pretty good. It's better than you think, just writing on your phone. And so I do really like your way of doing it. I think you have to be adaptable. I'm always wary of like, some writers can only write on this one computer they've used for 20 years at a certain time. And that's okay. But if there's a disruption to your life and you're suddenly not productive, I think that's quite dangerous. But yeah, I find these things so interesting, to be honest, Curtis. Really, really interesting. I just want to go back a little bit. You mentioned about your day job, TV and film. Uh, that piqued my interest straight away. What kind of things do you do?
So I just finished another. I started in sitcoms and kids shows, but more recently I've been doing documentaries. I just finished another short film for PBS, the public broadcasting system here in the United States. Um, it's equivalent, I guess, to your BBC in the UK. I don't know what the equivalent in China is,
Okay.
but it's a documentary that I made about a artist. Um, who works in cardboards, and he's a very, very fascinating story. And his stuff looks like terracotta warriors, but made with cardboard. But his stuff is just gorgeous. And so we had the premiere in November, and it's going to be on the broadcast schedule for the next TV season, starting later this year. So until then, I have some promotion to do with that, going to film festivals and things like that. So.
Yeah, it sounds so interesting. Just out of interest, then, how is writing for TV and film and documentaries? How's that different from, say, writing your memoir? Would you say?
Well, it's really different because when I film other people, I'm telling their stories, right? And so I'm listening and I'm paying attention. For me, and the specific type of writing I'm doing, which is the memoir writing, it's focused on myself, right? And so I have to really dig inward and reflect a lot more. And so it's completely different. I would imagine that if I were like a novelist or a fiction writer or wrote literary fiction, maybe it'd be a little bit less different, because it's the same type of story construction. But with memoir, it's I do think I think differently between the two. I'm much more self-absorbed, when it comes to the memoir.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I have to say, I'm looking forward to continuing with it and finishing it. I've got to say, just out of interest, what made you in the first place? Like maybe it's in your book. Don't get me wrong when I get to that part, but why did you want to write in the first place, or why did you get into the creative arts, shall we say?
Uh, well, I mean, I have two answers for this usually. One is the more serious answer, and one is the more flippant answer. Which one do you prefer?
Both, both.
Okay.
The more the merrier.
So, I like to say that I grew up in a Chinese restaurant, and so I was not surrounded by literature. I was not surrounded by books. People often ask writers, "What was the one book that really got you to start writing?" And I can't really pinpoint that because again, I only read for school assignments. I never had the joy of reading. But when I finally understood the importance of storytelling, that was because I was about to enter high school in the United States, which is about 14 years old, and a family friend had been murdered. It's a very famous case. If you haven't gotten to it, yeah, it's called the Vincent Chin murder case. It was in Detroit during the height of the anti-Japanese sentiment because of the auto industry. There's a lot of anti-Asian sentiments going around there, and this young man was actually a family friend of ours. He'd gone out to the celebrate his upcoming wedding. He goes to the strip club, and he at some point these two white auto workers come in, and they're overheard saying, "It's because of you mothers blanks that we're out of work," and they're all thrown out of the bar, and these two guys get in their car and they literally drive around the streets of Detroit trying to find Vincent, and they sadly find him sitting outside of a McDonald's. They take a baseball bat out of their car and they bash his head in. And because our families were friends, we found out that very next morning that Vincent was in the hospital struggling for his life. And when you're a 14-year-old kid and you hear about such a horrendous crime, you're going to check the newspaper, right? You're going to check the TV, radio to see how they're reporting it. Nobody covered it. I checked the next day. Nobody covered it again. I checked the day after that and the day after that. It took the mainstream media 12 whole days before they covered that story. In that time period, sadly, there was too much brain damage, and the family had to pull the plug. They had to cancel the wedding. There was all this stuff going on, and everybody was in our community was coming into our restaurant trying to find out what happened. Why was he there? And that contrast between what the mainstream media was interested, the stories they were interested, compared to what our community cared about, really stuck out at me because several months later, when the judge came down with a sentence, he only fined these guys $3,000, and they never had to serve a single day in jail. And his rationale was that you don't put these kind of people in jail. And when he said that, I totally understood what he meant because for the last year or more, all the media in Detroit were telling all these stories about the white auto workers and how much their lives were struggling and how they were losing their homes and losing their jobs. And so there was so much built-in sympathies for these killers automatically, right? Meanwhile, there was never any stories about, an Asian American or a Chinese American. And that contrast really stood out to me and thinking like, wow, you really have to tell your story beforehand. People need to get to know each other. They have to see each other and they have to hear about each other's experiences so that we can connect with each other. So you don't wait for these terrible crimes to happen, right? And so that was my sense of that storytelling was important. I don't know if that necessarily meant that I was going to be a writer myself. It was only when I went off to college. I wasn't planning on going to college, but my mom, my mom didn't really like the restaurant and that restaurant life. So she was like, "You guys need to get an education. You guys need to get out of here." And I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to go to college because, I'm a gay man. At that time, AIDS, people were dying at a very young age. One of my favorite customers was actually brutally murdered during my senior year in high school. But I rationalized that, what would be 4 years of my life versus, my mom who's given up her whole life for me, right? She sacrificed her whole life to work for me and my siblings. And so I made a deal with my mom. I said, okay, mom, I will apply to college, but I'll only apply to one school. And if I don't get in, I'm not going. And she said, okay, fine, apply to Michigan. And so I applied to school, and sadly, I got in. And so I went off to college. I was one of those kids that actually worked full time and went to school at night. And I didn't know what I was going to study, right? Because I'm just there to, because my mom. But there are a lot of creative writing classes at night for some reason, right, at 6 o'clock. And so I just started signing up for them. And I did the math, and I said, okay, if I study poetry writing and if I only wrote haikus, I could graduate in fewer than 500 words. And that's how I got into the creative writing program. And the very exclusive program at Michigan, they only took 20 students. And I've just never looked back. That's how I became a writer. So I didn't know what I was going to do with myself, and writing just sort of there. And I do like to say this though, because and this is a very important point for me, is I like to encourage people that come from non-traditional writing backgrounds to pursue writing, because writing and telling stories shouldn't just be for the rich people in society. We need to hear stories from working class people too. And so even though I grew up without, this surrounded by books or whatever, I was still being groomed to be a writer. And the reason I say that is because I was sitting in that dining room all that time, listening to the stories of all of our customers, people coming in and telling me about their lives and what they were going through. And, there was a very diverse group of people, black, white, Jewish, gay, straight. I mean, so those stories need to be told too. And so, that's sort of how I find myself in that way. And that's sort of my mission, is to continue telling these stories that I think that maybe most people don't get a chance to hear.
Yeah, great, powerful stories. And one thing I'm getting from you, yeah, that sense of personal experience, especially where it's traumatic, and I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, I mean, it's horrendous. I couldn't believe those guys got off.
Yeah, it was shocking.
$3,000, was it $3,000? It seems to me just completely crazy. But then I'm roughly following on the news at the moment. I know there's been a shooting in America with an ICE agent, and I'm not really completely aware of it. It's only like on the periphery of what I'm following. But it's like these things do seem to happen. It's not just America. It happens in a lot of countries as well. But I think
Well, I mean, we're just in
sometimes,
this very terrible time period right now. And what's really interesting to me is how both sides are really trying to control the narrative right now, right? Donald Trump and JD Vance and all those people are trying to say, that this woman was trying to run them over, that she's a leftist, and they use all these really vitriolic words. Meanwhile, the other side, the woman who died, her wife, has released a statement saying that she was a Christian, she was kind, she sparkled. You know what I mean? I mean, both sides are really trying to set the narrative right now, of how this case will be processed. Not just in the courts, but also in the courts of public opinion, right? Like, and we're so polarized right now that I think that people are automatically just falling in line with their camps and pushing aside any reason or thought. Because we're so polarized in our country right now. It's just really sad that even when someone dies, you can't take a moment to just reflect and give that person's life some meaning, right? It's just really, really quite sad.
yeah, completely. Yeah, you're mentioning as well about like creative writing and how you got into it. Yeah, my road was reasonably similar. When I was at school, I wasn't into reading. I
Hmm.
was into writing when I was a when like I'm not sure what it's called now in America, but like primary school when you were a young kid. I love writing, and then I go to secondary school, and it just knocked it out of me. Like it was very academic, very rigid. It wasn't about creativity. It wasn't. It was just about passing exams. You do it like this. There's no creativity. I stopped reading books.
Mm.
All the books you do in school, I think it's difficult. I think they're not bad books. They're not. They're the kind of books like, I mean, a good example would be like To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a great book, and you can appreciate it as an adult. It's hard for a 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid to relate to that and to then enjoy it. And so I got into reading, first of all, with Stephen King. I
Mm.
read a book of his called Salem's Lot, and I was 18, and I was just about to go to university, college, and I read that book in the summer holiday before when I just couldn't stop reading. I read a bunch of his stuff, and that's how I got into reading. And I went to university. I did history, and I could do history like I always wanted to do, like lots of exploration of the kind of things that maybe I couldn't do in school. Because in the UK, history is very British and European centric. So it usually means, and it's a bit of a joke, it usually means Nazis. It's like the joke, it's like you do Nazis. What are you doing next year? You're doing the rise of Nazism. It's all that. And listen, listen, don't get me wrong, it's great. But
It's why your
you
mom
do
watched
start to
read all those
yearn for
books.
something else. Well, sorry?
It's why your mom is so hooked on those books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she would have got the same thing
Yeah, yeah,
over and over again.
yeah. She just falls
And
in love with
yeah,
them. Yeah, it's interesting
yeah,
the narratives that each of the countries sort of follow, right? In Europe, that's probably the most recent trauma, right? The Nazis.
yeah, yeah. I think it's the one is maybe it's just easier to do. Like so when I was like getting towards the end of school time, I wanted to know more about, for example, the history of America or the history of China. So when I go to university and I do history, well, you can do, and that's when I first learned about China. And don't get me wrong, it was modern history. It was
Mm,
like the communists, the Civil War, and all that stuff. But still, that to a certain extent, that's still with me, you know.
mm,
And so, yeah, very interesting. And I got into like reading like classic literature. I was like, you know what? It was more of a project than anything else. I'm going to read War and Peace. I'm going to read
mm,
20 pages a day until it's
mm,
finished. I'm going to read Great Expectations. And that got me into reading. And then I started like fooling around with like poetry, love
mm.
poems. Not good. You know, these are the kind of poems. They're not good. They're not good. You know, I love you, blah, blah, blah. But you know, it was fun. It was a way in, and I was doing that for some time, reading a lot of like pseudo romantic poetry. You know, the flower. You know, the flower.
Yeah.
Um, and then I decided that, probably a bit like yourself, I wanted to take it a bit more seriously. And by that time, I was living in Korea, and I knew I was going to go and move to China and live here and teach here. And so I'd got onto a master's degree, like yourself, in poetry. So that's what I did. And I just got in, I just made the poems, you know, more serious, better, I would say, more modern, more contemporary, especially with themes. And and then yeah, it's interesting. When you start writing about anything, I think you just become more creative. And it's like the fire. And it's like, it's not that I want to write more poems. It then became, I've got an idea for a book. I
Yeah.
have to write it. I can't
Yeah.
wait for 4 or 5 years. And even now, I'm like, at the moment I'm doing like poems, I'm doing some blog posts, I'm doing podcasts. I'm now thinking about podcasts like this. I've got a blog, and I tend to write very like how-to-y, you know, kind of blogs, kind of generic. I learn from them, don't get me wrong, but I'm thinking I might write type these interviews up, you know, not as a transcript, but like an embedded interview, and just see what happens. Just another, it's another, whatever happens, another outlet for my creativity. And if there's anybody out there like thinking about doing, like say, courses in writing, I think that's one of the best things you get. It does make
Um,
you more creative, I think.
a couple of things. Transcription services are pretty cheap. I would just do it that way instead of spending all that time typing. But there might be some use in transcribing interviews. But I was going to ask you, because I'm curious about your own writing. Where did you get your master's, and how do you feel? Because you're in China now. How do you feel as a person writing in English? Are you writing in English? I'm assuming, or you're
Yeah,
writing in
yeah, yeah,
Chinese?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I can't
Do you
speak
find that
Chinese. Mm.
there's a writing community for you there? Like, how are you getting feedback on your work, and how does it affect you? Because or maybe at your work you're speaking English, or how does that affect you? Because you're surrounded by all these the Chinese language instead. You know.
I think for the first part, I would say that when I first came here, it was a big shock. I mean, culture shock. Even now, China's changed a lot since when I first came. I came here in 2010. I went to Beijing,
Mm,
and even then, Beijing was very much industrializing. It was an industrial city. It wasn't like the movies showed or the website showed that the news companies showed. It wasn't Shanghai like Pudong. It wasn't like that, you
mm,
know. And it was very industrial. The traffic was horrendous, and you meet a lot of very working class people. In fact, you may even say laboring people, because that might be a better description. And I just started writing about them and trying to like tell their lives. Well, it's hard because I don't speak Chinese, so I don't
mm,
know them, but you kind of have to follow body language a lot of the time. And, you know, and I still do write like this. And so
mm,
that's got me into, that really affected me. For the first probably 2, 3, 4 years here, I'm probably writing 2 or 3 poems a week about all the different people I meet. And I've carried on doing that as I've traveled around China and lived in different places in China as well.
mm,
Um, Yeah, I write in English. Yeah, what was it? Oh, so you asked about the university. It was Manchester Metropolitan University,
mm,
creative writing, which is I think it's one of the best or one of the most notable universities for creative writing, I believe. But creative writing is quite popular, so more and more universities are doing it. Um, I did it by distance learning. In the UK, there's quite a big culture of doing master's degrees online. I know
mm,
it's not as common in America, but in the UK, it's very much accepted that you're working.
mm.
So, but it was UK time. So I'm waking up at 2 a.m. for, I can't remember now. I think it was 1 or 2 hour sessions. I can't remember. I think it might have been 2 hours. Yeah. Like a
Wow.
poetry workshop.
A Zoom session
Yeah.
with everybody. Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Well, congratulations on being able to do that. You know.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say it. One of the fellow, I've just got in touch with one of the fellow poets that I was on the course with, and she said to me recently, "Yeah, that was amazing what you were doing." And I said, I didn't think about it at the time,
Mm,
but I look back and I was like, "Yeah, I suppose it was." I couldn't do it now with a young family, but I was single. I could. It was at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can go to bed early, wake up, sleep for 5 hours, wake up literally just before it starts, wake up, do the course. And then the idea is to go back to bed, but this is the thing, Curtis. You're so pumped. If you're
yeah.
doing a workshop, there's a lot. You're looking at maybe 6 or 7 poems from the other people that are there. You're talking about it. Your poem is being talked about. There was one time one of my poems got absolutely slated by
Mm,
this. The guy was a bit crazy, and he it was his first session and last session, and he launched into this tirade against me and then left the session.
wow.
You know, he was
He
a bit
left
crazy, I think.
course or just that one session. Maybe you triggered something in your writing. Maybe you said
Oh yeah,
something.
I think I
Yeah.
don't think it was just me. I'm trying to remember. I think his poem was up before mine to be discussed, and it
Mm,
wasn't a bad poem. It was a good poem. It was, I think, if I remember, it's all coming back to me now. I think he was in a car walking down a field at night and doing something, and it was okay. It was fine. But I think there was just there was constructive criticism coming his way, and maybe this was his first session. It was kind of
mm,
strange. We'd had a, we'd had about 4 or 5 sessions before this, and he wasn't in the community, so I don't think he was really ready to kind of for this kind of community from writers who know each other for 4 or 5 weeks but know how it works, shall we say. And so I think a few people had said things to him first. I'd probably said something, but it wasn't like, it was constructive and it wasn't like overly critical. But sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's like that. But then mine came up. And listen, he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. It was very, at that stage I was still writing quite romantic-esque poems and I was in a transition phase. And it was
Mm,
actually about Arlington Cemetery in
mm.
DC. And I'd visited there maybe a year or so previously. And I'd seen a funeral taking place. This would be when, America is still in the Iraq War. And I went to visit there, was walking around, and there was a military funeral. And I wrote about that. It's quite romantic, rhyme, that kind of thing. And he slated it. Like I say, he wasn't wrong. It's just this is the thing about constructive criticism. If you don't construct as well, obviously it's harsh, it's not good, but it's
Yeah.
you don't really take it on board. You don't really listen. Um,
There is an art to
but
contributing to the
yeah,
workshop,
yeah.
both as someone who submits their work and someone who also gives critiques, right? I mean, you do have to be practiced and skilled at it.
Yeah, I think like anything, I try to live by this. You should only give the type of advice, especially if it's like tone, the kind of thing that you would like to receive. So if you're being too harsh, how would you feel if you were being if you were receiving that harsh treatment? I think it's getting that balance. I think if you know someone and you genuinely you want them to improve their writing or improve their poem or whatever it is, you have to give something. But I think you have to be willing to find positives because there's positives in everything that we write. As soon as you write, you put pen to page and you write one word. Great, you're starting to write. Even that is a positive. Um, and then yeah, so like the guy left, and then I was left. I was fuming, of course.
It's like a
You-
hit and run.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to get to sleep.
yeah,
Your heart's like boom, 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 boom.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
That's true. Yeah, no. So I don't have a master's. I just have a bachelor's, which I guess is,
it's okay.
yeah. And I never did the advanced program. But the way I learned how to write a memoir was I signed up for all these Zoom sessions during COVID because they were
Okay.
really, really popular, right? And I signed up for workshops a lot in Europe because actually it's perfect for me because 7 o'clock in Europe, which is when a lot of these workshops would start, is 11 or 12 in the afternoon for me in America. So it was a nice lunch break for me. So I'd wake up in the morning, I'd write, and then I'd take a break and I'd do these workshops. And then in the afternoon, I would either read or do more revision, and then around 7 o'clock, I'd do an American group, so I just went whole hog. It was sort of like in some ways my MFA program, right? But I met so many wonderful people that I stayed in contact with, including some people, someone from Korea who, like you, would wake up at some ungodly hour to participate with everybody. But because he was writing in English, he just felt like he, needed to, work with a group, in the United States. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
and that's the
there
thing
are
about
different ways to do
workshops.
this. Yeah. So the thing I would say about that is that if you have the funds and you can go to MFA program, that's great. But if not, there are free ways to sort of learn and become a better writer. You know, money should not be prohibitive. Hopefully, is not a prohibitive factor as to whether or not you decide to pursue writing and telling your story.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When I did my MA, I think the price was quite reasonable.
Good.
Um, how much it might have been? Depends. What it was like, maybe like £6,000, but I've heard it's double that now. And it used to be very good for American students. It wasn't that expensive for international students. That's gone. And so a friend of mine was looking at doing it in the UK, but I think he was quoted like £20,000 or something. And I said, I'm not sure it's completely worth it. I think I like doing my MA, but there is that kind of value to it that you have to like. It's nice to think you can do it and improve your writing and get published, but I bet not even 50% of writers that do it get published, to be honest, at least not straight away. And I think you have to do it for like, I did it because I knew I was like 32 at the time. I
Mm.
knew that it was going to help my career. So it didn't matter if I didn't get published or not. And it did help my career. I'd get teaching jobs. And literally the boss would say, I hired you because of your this MA in creative writing.
That's
And that
great.
it would literally pay itself back just with the pay increase alone.
So you're primarily teaching creative writing in China?
Um, no, no, I teach English like English as a second language,
Oh, English
but
second
it's
language.
just it's yeah, it's one of those things. It's if you've got, let's say, an MA or a degree in creative writing or any kind of
Mhm.
English, say English literature, it's just more prestigious.
Mm.
So it makes you more likely to get a better English job at a better school, if that makes sense.
The British
Um,
accent isn't good enough.
yeah, yeah. Also here, I also teach like a first language course where there is a bit of literature. So there's
Mm.
a
All
bit of
right.
like literary analysis where you analyze language, not so
Mm.
much like themes or what it's about. You analyze like similes, flowery language,
Mm.
figurative language. And my my MA does help me with that.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
but like I say, if you're older, like my friend, I think he's in his mid 50s. I could be wrong. Could be low 50s. And I was like, well, I don't. For that kind of money, I don't know. And what I'll do is, when I speak to him next week, I'll actually mention some free workshops to him, and that might be like a route that he wants to go down. He does like travel writing. You see, um,
Mm.
yeah, he lived a lot of his life in Spain. His wife's Spanish, and so I should ask to. I haven't read any of his writing though. I should ask to see some. I can just imagine it's just full of so many interesting things. To be honest.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to ask like one more thing, like just before we finish this. It's like, I like. What about like themes? What would you say when you're writing like your memoir? What are the main themes that you like discuss? Would you say?
Well, it's interesting. The first question I always ask people, like when they approach me and they say they want to write their memoir, I ask them, are you writing it for yourself or are you writing it for an audience because you want to sell it, right? You want to get published. Those are two really critically different things. If you're just writing for yourself, you can do whatever, right? You don't have to impress anybody. But if you are trying to sell it as a book, you do have to ask yourself, well, what does the audience want, right? Because they have to decide that they're going to shell over $30, which isn't cheap, right, to pay for your hardback. And so you do have to take into account a little bit more. If it had just been my own opinion of what I would have written about, I would have been completely happy talking about Chinese food and my family. Do you know what I mean? But because I was trying to sell the book, I had to talk about some more serious issues because at that time in the country, in the United States, we had the murder of George Floyd. We had a lot of the gay book bans going on. And because of that, I had to make my book a little bit more sociological, as you say, like a little bit more, I won't say political, but just I had to talk about racial identity a little bit more. Like, well, what did it mean to be Asian in a very black and white world? What was the coming out process like for you at that time period when AIDS was around? Some of these things that are a little bit heavier, I had to start talking about, uh, you know, and I felt like I could do it because I had those experiences. But I actually just prefer writing fun stuff, comedy stuff. Like I like to be a little bit more lighthearted, but in order to sell the book, I had to add a little more gravitas, if that made sense. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
in
totally.
terms of so in terms of the themes, it's you know. I start off the book by saying the opening line from the book is, Welcome to Chung's. Is this for here to go? That was the line my dad would say to any customer that came into the restaurant. And so that theme of for here to go, this idea of do I stay in Detroit, this city that, is really struggling, or do I go off to college? When I graduate college, do I go off? It's like, because I come from a family of immigrants. I start off, the opening image is about my great grandfather leaving China in the late 1800s for America. You know what I mean? So there's this whole idea of fluidity, of finding your space. And so I think that's probably something that, I think about. I'm also the idea of, family. You have your bio family versus your chosen family. So I think those are kind of the themes that I sort of look at.
Yeah, family comes through very, very strongly. I do get like even like the undercurrent of like race and heritage, and like obviously we're talking about your family and how your family fits in within this wider community in Detroit. And you drop in a line or a sentence very early on about your mum says to you, you want to go outside, you're not allowed to go outside. There's a serial killer. I forgot the name of this Bigfoot. That was it, Bigfoot. And the way you write it, it's almost comic. But and I mean this in a good way. And it's what's called comic tragic. And I'm like, what? Like,
It's a humor book. It's a humor book, but yet five people get murdered by the time I'm 18 years old. But I like to say that's Detroit. It was a very, very violent city growing up, like drugs, alcohol, prostitutes. I mean, all these characters appear in
I
my
mean,
book.
yeah,
That's how I survived it, right? Being able to laugh at it and just look at the positivity and to move forward in it. And so the one thing I say to anybody out there interested in writing your memoir should sound and feel like you're just having a conversation with the reader. You want to be as authentic and true to your own voice. So I feel like I wrote it with the voices as if I was just having dinner with you, Hayes. I mean, that's why it's really interesting to me when people come up to me who I've never met before and said, I read your book and you sound just like that person. You know what I mean? I totally pictured it like it's like we were having dinner. You know what I mean? Like they come up to me after I do the reading and it's like I read your book previously. I heard it on books on tape or whatever. So it's I think that's the most important thing about writing a memoir is that the voice has to be true to yourself. You know what I mean? It has to be like you're actually having a live conversation with that reader. And that's what I would say. That's the advice I would give to memoir writers. Don't affect a certain voice. Don't affect a certain quality or personality. Be genuine.
yeah, I totally get that. Like I said, I feel like I'm very much I'm placed there. I find it very. It's like I feel like I'm a diner that's not eating, or maybe I've eaten and I'm finished, and I'm just, especially when you're talking about your restaurant,
Mm,
um, and I feel like you're just following it like there's a camera. I think that it's very, 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 like I said before, it's very, very, very well written. Um,
thank you. It
Okay,
is. I
Curtis,
mean,
I think we can end it there. Obviously, best of luck for the rest of your buck. It is, I'll be honest, it's my dad's birthday coming up, and I'll buy the buck for him
oh,
as
okay.
well. My dad will love it. My dad loves Chinese food. In fact,
Oh, okay.
whilst we're talking about the fact, he was the one that got me into Chinese food because he
Oh,
was the
nice.
one that said, "Oh, yeah, the chip shop. It was called Chan's Chippy."
Yeah.
And it's in this small village called Crawshaw Booth,
Mm.
which is really small, and maybe most people just go through it. And I think it's still there. I think it's still there.
No, so
And
I did a bunch of
he,
readings. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead. I interrupted you.
yeah, no, no, just that's it. It's just, yeah, I think so. Just my dad, he got me into it, and my brother as well. And from there, we get into Indian food as well. So I think that maybe that's quite beautiful. I think I can give a little bit back to him as well, just like you've given to me and to the rest of the world. So, again, Curtis, thank you very much. I'd love to have you on the show again. I've got, as you know, I've got a list of topics to talk to you about. we did 3 out of 11, and that's a good thing. And that's a good thing, I think.
Okay, yeah, I happy to be
Yeah.
back, and I want to learn more about Chengdu because not only is it the gay capital of China, I hear, but it's also the panda capital. So I want your take on all that kind of stuff. But we're
Oh yeah,
friends now
Brent, we could.
online,
Yeah,
so let's keep the conversation going. And yeah,
yeah,
good luck with your writing.
fantastic, Curtis.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you very much, and you too. Okay.
okay, bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.